YIRAH gives wisdom and understanding. May the utterances of my mouth, thoughts of my heart, find favor for you, God, YIRAH, my strength and my redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So we are in Let There Be Light, section 9. So it opens and says, Vayomer Elohim Yehior Me'orot. And Elohim said, let there be luminaries. The word Me'orot, or luminaries, is written here with a defective spelling, mainly without the letter Vav. This means that the children's disease, croup, was created, because without Vav, Me'orot means curses, as in the verse, the curse, Me'orot of Hashem, is in the house of the wicked. For after the illumination of the primordial light was concealed, the skull, meaning klipa, of the brain was created. This klipa expanded and brought forth another klipa. As soon as the klipa went forth, it ascended and descended until it reached the small face. It wanted to cleave to it and become part of its form. It refused completely to be separated from it. When the Holy One blessed be He created Adam, He separated it from there, and the klipa descended to the level of Malchus only, in order to fix it in this world, from the level of Malchus on, and not above it. So it's going to tell us that the word Me'orot also means the divine word, which is spelled Aleph, Mem, Resh, Tav. And it begins here discussing the same aspects of the Atik, except here it identifies the 231 gates as having a klipa around it. And all of the concentrite circles are likened to klipot. It is written that every world is a klipa to that which is beneath it, and that which is above it is a klipa to that which is beneath it. And this continues on throughout all of the grades, so that all of the grades are a type of husk or a klipa to every other grade. When it was desirous to create the Adam, meaning the constructs of the Adam, to the fulfillment of the Adam, it became separated from this klipa, meaning this first realm, this first rung. And what emerged from that first rung, an example where the hard spark was, were the kings. And the kings, when they descended, is the secret of Malkut. And so the klipa passed through to animate those sparks. And those 7 kings of Edom are considered to be a klipa. Thus it says, in order to fix. And the Aramaic here on the word fix is rooted in the word tikkun. When the klipa saw Hawa clinging to the side of Adam, so to understand, Adam refers to Adam Kadma. Adam Kadma is the circular atom. It refers to there's two. There's Adam Yoshar and Adam Kadman. Adam Kadman refers to the concentrite circles, and Adam Yoshar refers to the atom of the linear spherot, because there are circular and linear spherot to existence. And so in this particular understanding, they were addressing the klipa as it relates to Adam, but then they descend to Malchus, where there was a separation. So the klipa saw Eve or Chawa cling to the side of Adam, who represented the beauty of above, and saw in them the complete form. It flew up from its place at the level of Malchus and wanted to cling to the small faces of Adam and Chawa as before. However, the guards at the gates did not allow the klipa to cling to them. The Holy One, blessed be He, scolded it and cast it into the depths of the sea. So Malchus is called Yam Sof, and because the circular Adam refers to the Simsum, and Chawa cleaving to the side refers to the hard spark, because the hard spark represents the female of Adam Kadma. And so here it's hinting to this idea. There are other levels that have to deal with this, but nonetheless, this explains why within inside of Adam, they saw the Klippa, meaning the kings down below, after the emergence from the hard spark, saw within that light that the totality of the forms were in there, and it saw the hard spark cleaving to that. And this is being identified as Adam and Eve. And the term Eve is tricky because the Arizal tells us there's the first Eve and second Eve. The Klippa sat there in the depths of the sea, meaning the sparks sat there at the depths of the sea, because the sea is the first restriction. Bina is called Mem Yod, but Chokmah is called a Yam, a sea. And then Bina is called a river, etc. And so the sea refers to the depths of a cavern brought about through the Simsum. So it sat in the depths of the sea until Adam and his wife sinned. Then the Holy One, blessed be He, took the Klippa out from the depths of the sea. It took control over all those babies who are the small faces of people. And here, when it talks about small face, one of the terms for this is Zeranpin. Zeranpin literally means small face. And the Klippa was rooted in that. And it was all for the purpose of correction, because ultimately the 7 sparks that emerge are the ultimate Shorosh of this archetypal Zer. So it took control over all those babies, because Zeranpin is called a son and Nukva is called a daughter, and this refers to the Ruach and Nefesh. So it took control over all those babies, who are the small faces of people, who deserve punishment for the sins of their fathers. It wandered around the world, approached the gates of the terrestrial Garden of Eden, and saw the cherubs guarding the gates of the garden, and sat down near the bright blade of the sword from which it had originally emerged. The bright blade of the revolving sword, we know, refers to Zeranpin, because it was described as the Ruach. And it turned every which way, because Chesed is south, Gevurah is north, Tiferet is east, Netzach is up, Hod is down, Yisod is west. This is also synonymous with the sparks that emerged. When the sparks emerged out of the hard spark, it did so in Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, and Malchus. Thus, the Klippa formed in that place. Now, we need to understand that the sparks that emerge are not necessarily klipathic, but rather when the sparks emerged, they animated something in the Reshimim. They animated something that existed and didn't exist. That's how the Klippa came into existence. It was animated by the sparks that fell into that place, because those sparks were pieces of wisdom, and wisdom gives life to its possessor. And when the kings emerged, they were all aspects of that supernal wisdom, all aspects of that supernal life, and thus they animated the Klippa in that place. When the bright blade of the revolving sword changed to judgment, the Klippa fled and wandered around the world and found babies due to be punished. And so now the sword turns right and left, and depending on its rotation, determines on whether it reaches in the aspect of dinin in judgment, or when it is in mercy. It is called the bright blade of a revolving sword because it revolves and changes back and forth between mercy and judgment. The Klippa laughed with the babies and then killed them. It did this during the waning of the moon, as the light diminished. This is why AMO'ROT luminaries is spelled without the letter Vav, which means curses. When Cain was born, the Klippa was unable to cling to him, but later approached him, cleaved to him, and bore from him spirits and flying spirits. And the secret is found in Likutei at the end of the Gate of Kings, where, again, the secret of the baby refers to the Simsum, which is the contraction. And the hard spark was revealed there to be the egg. And when light, an example seminal emission, strikes the egg, it actually produces a spark. It produces light. This has actually been recorded using technology that there's light that's emitted at the time that an egg is inseminated. And so this process of the beginning, as we usually discuss in relation to the Atik, is also in direct relation with the creation of a baby. And therefore the Klippa is around the baby at that exact time, because it's mirroring the reflection of the creation of the processes of the Atik, in which the Klippa was birthed, as it were, and had the ability to affect. Now, the letter Vav missing means the refinement of 6. It also means Yisod, and that's why it began to talk about this, the sword, because the Vav is Chesed Gevur Tiferet Netzach Hod Yisod. The Vav is the small face. It's talking about where there was any type of lack of refinement in Midos. And wherever there was a lack of the refinement of Midos, it would allow the Klippa to lay hold to the respective place, and thus to cause types of illnesses and ultimately kill the child, God forbid. But this is what would cause that to occur. And a lot of this came into being as to what was the intention of the father when they bore the child. And we talked a lot about how the child comes into existence and how the souls are grafted from the Sita Achra or from the side of Kedusha, and how to determine whether the child was grafted from Kedusha or the Klippa, and how a person has relations is a reflection of all of these things. So then it continues on here. It begins to tell us of a story about Adam had intercourse with female spirit for 130 years until Naama came. So 130 years is the numerical value of Samael. This is said explicitly in Apples from the Orchard. And this is because it was as if Adam had relations. The reason why is because Adam is the 45 name. Understand this very carefully. Adam is the 45 name because its value is 45. Aleph is 1, Dalet is 4, Mem is 40. The squaring of a word refers to a backside. And thus, the squaring of the 45 name, Yod, Yod Ha, Vav Ha, is the value 130, or Samael. And thus, it means that the lights that Adam was coupling with the backside, meaning the backside of his own aspect. And from the damages that were in the backside is where we get the term Achra. Because another word for Achra means other, or Achor can also mean back. And it's precisely the backside of the Sefirot where this is emanating from. And so when it says that Adam coupled with for 130 years, it's talking about Adam is 45. The squaring of the 45 name is a value 130. And thus this refers to the backside of his aspects. And this is exactly where the spirits of the other side were coming into existence, because they were in the secret of he created the one as well as the other. And so it says of Naama, and Naama is very important being, because oftentimes when people talk about Lilith, they think that she's all of these different things, but in reality, when they talk about Lilith, they're actually talking about Naama. Naama is the one who has all the sexual perversity and seeks to do all of these debauched things and bring in moms or babies and all of these other kinds of things into existence. That's really Naama. It's not really Lilith. In fact, Lilith was the exact opposite. Lilith did not want to have sex with Adam, as our Midrash and various sages hint to and tell us about. And yet, in modern culture, she's hypersexualized, despite the fact that Lilith was not interested in having sexual copulation. So how they got this idea of her being over personified as this sexual deviant came about because they intermingled her with this idea of Naama. Now, Naama means a woman's beauty. Naam means beauty, and Hey is effeminized. And what Naama does, and this is fairly terrifying, but you guys can all do research on this. So what Naama does is she is a demoness of lust. And many of the things they attribute to Lilith are really should have been attributed to Naama. And what she does is she entices women to use their beauty and to use their ability of allure and captivation in order to engage in sexual acts. Then she takes their beauty from them. And there are various verses that talk about this. I will give you baldness, scabs, right? And so this is this idea of beauty being taken away. And so the beauty being taken away is on behalf of Naama. This is why her name is a female's beauty. It entails the idea that she takes a female's beauty. And she does this to any type of sexual perversity. Now, when you have copulation, and many people don't know this, but when a person has relations and a male ejaculates inside of her, her actual DNA changes, which means that a woman's DNA literally changes. Every time that a man ejaculates inside of her, her DNA has alters. Her body absorbs genetic code and literally alters. You guys can look this up. It's very fascinating. And so the reason why many women, by the time they're in their 40s, the time in their 50s, they look extraordinarily different than how they did in their 30s and 20s is because this world has been duped to sinning against the Torah. And because we have sexual relations without a get, we have sexual relations without the order of family, then what ends up happening is the woman's DNA becomes altered by every sexual partner that she has. And that alters her DNA in an irreversible way, and to which her face literally will alter to such a degree that you barely even recognize that person anymore. And this is because the ugliness of this sin has absorbed and altered her DNA. And she's taken on the same darkness of the men she's had relations with, which is why it's so imperative to be cautious about that. And it's where most of the things about showing hair and being immodest and all of these things, because what you're doing is invoking or riling up the iniquity inside of a man's heart. And if you have relations with a man whose heart is desired only in that iniquity, then the seed that he emits, God forbid you have relation with that person, will alter you, and now Ma will collect the beauty and disfigure you. And the child gets end up being birthed from the Sita Achra, meaning from the other side. And so the child becomes like a wild beast, like a wild animal. This generation is just filled with wild children that do the most heinous things. And a lot of this is because we've indulged ourselves in a society that's based off of hypersexualization, etc., etc., etc. And so this is what happens when Adam produces from the backside. And so these spirits that get brought forth, we can actually see even in amongst human beings, because they draw a ruach from somewhere, and they draw a nefesh from somewhere. And where is their ruach drawn from, and where is their nefesh drawn from? Was it on the side of Kedusha, or was it on the side of the Sita Achra? Because of her beauty, she led the sons of Elohim, Azza and Azazel, astray. Azza and Azazel were led astray. This is very important understanding. So these are Ayin and Zayn. Ayin and Zayn of the sparks are informed to be Azza and Azazel, and she led them astray, meaning the Nukva did. And there are sections of Azza and Azazel in here that will kind of bring out their story, but essentially they say to the Holy One, blessed be He, we can bring the correction. If we were down there, we would be led astray as the human beings are. And assuredly, they went down and became worse than the human beings, and they absolutely became led astray. We have this kind of idea that Azza and Azazel are these kinds of demons. People say Azazel, and they just think of this kind of shadam because it's been polluted with pop culture and New Age mysticism. But nonetheless, Azza and Azazel were actually redeemer angels that sought to bring about tikkun to the world, and they were led astray and brought down. And when they came down, they failed their mission. She bore them all sorts of new kinds of klipa, evil spirits and demons spread out from her into the world. And this is from Na'amah. Now remember, Na'amah is from a woman's beauty. It was to such a degree, this is where the covering of the hair and the covering of, because the hair is the klipa, the hair is the husk. That's what empowers it. And because the male comes from the right and the female comes from the left, her power to a woman's beauty is natural. So for example, her hair is able to empower the klipa in a very powerful way, meaning that her hair is a symbol of her beauty, and the symbol of her beauty and the symbol of her hair is what empowers the klipa. They wander around the world during the night, deriding human beings and causing nocturnal pollution. Until they deride human beings because they become polluted. Now we're dealing with actual demonic spirits in this world. If permission was given for the eye to see all the invisible things in this world, they'd be astonished and wonder how they could possibly survive in such a place. It slightly insinuates that most people would just commit suicide. They would not be able to handle the real reality of what's going on in this place if they had permission to see. One of the most frightening and terrifying sections of the entire Zohar is a section called Pikude. PQ Day, they talk about all the different chambers and all the different Malochs and all the different Shadim and demons, and they are terrifying in nature. There are demons that trick you to look into a mirror. And the second you look in a mirror, it produces another type of demon. And the demon looks at you and you see a reflection of itself. It bursts in your own consciousness and says, you're not good enough. You're ugly. Change yourself. That entire thought process, if you knew that when you looked in a mirror and had a negative thought about yourself, that was actually an entity, who would be able to endure such things if they knew the truth? Sometimes ignorance is bliss. This is why they used to say mirrors were magical instruments, portals to the other side. This is the origin of mirrors. Mirrors were magical items. And now what person looks in the mirror and says, I like what I see? And how many people look in the mirror and say, wow, I need to change something? The very thought of you saying, I need to change something, is the demon. This is the example of man after his desires, demon after demon. Because, see, the demons swoop down 6,000 parsangs. They're above you. They're not below you. They're above you. This is why there's things like Dybbuk and possession, because they're not below you. They're above you, meaning they're above your forms, and they're far craftier than you. In fact, they're so crafty that you think that it's you. But again, I've already told you that you have emotions, you're not your emotions. Then what are those emotions? Where is that bestirred from? What are those thoughts? Where does that come from? Not all thoughts are your thoughts. How do you know? How is it that you can have a chaotic thought and then question your own thought? That's because you have a mind. You're not your mind. You're the choice. Now, even though I described it in Likute in terms of forms and said the forms are this and the forms are that, because that's a palatable way of receiving a very deep matter about the nature of the upper world and what's actually going on. But in reality, they're hordes of angels and demons that create a war in heaven. And that war in heaven means a war in one's forms. And on the left side are all of the demons, and on the right side are all of the angels. And there are collective good experiences and collective bad experiences. And the second you have a negative thought, a Shadim is birthed. A Lilin is birthed. The second you have a vain thought, where you, whether male or female, where the intention behind what you're doing is to attract and do this or do that, or to manipulate or do this or do that, immediately, if a man says, I'm going to get dressed up so I can be attractive to females and draw their attention, immediately, the entire thought process behind that, he's birthed inside of his collective sum of experiences, the serpent's identity, more demons. Demons of lust, demons of anger, demons of desire, demons that form from manipulation. And so that the truth is that every person has 1,000 demons to their left and 10,000 demons to their right, and they're heaped upon every individual like mountains of sand. And again, if permission was given for the eye to see all of the invisible things, they'd be staggered and perplexed and wonder how they could possibly survive in such a place. And it's for that exact reason. And so it says, they wander around the world during the night and they deride human beings, because they wander around in the night when the klipa is more stronger, and they deride human beings to do all types of perverse things. And so when they do those perverse things, they empower their own. And this is how the serpent breeds them. And the demons breed through them, like Adam, sleeping and coupling with the Sita Achra. Sleeping with the 130 years is very similar to a man who has a thought and then entertains the thought. And that creates another thought and then entertains that and creates more thoughts and more thoughts and more. All of a sudden, you have an entire conceptualization. And that conceptualization is a horde. And so now you find yourself in the midst of breeding all kinds of unclean spirits. And they were called spirits because guess where they're birthed at? Yetzirah, your forms, which is called the Ruach. Thus they are called the Ruachin, meaning spirits. And what were the demons called? Shadim. And where did Shadim come? It means, you should understand, Shadim is Me Shaddai, from Shaddai, which is Yisod, which is your mental form. Because when your mental form, an example, Yisod, becomes connected with the Yisod of your mouth through Lashon Hara, or the Yisod of the Guf, which is the reproductive organ, it produces Shadim. The Shadim are the demons that come from Yisod. And so I've explained in generality how some of them come from the left. And so we see these called Lilin. And these Lilin come from Gavura because they come from desires. They're birthed out of desires. They're birthed from the left side. And the other ones that are called Ruachin, and they come in from the right side. And they're all in the Sita Achra. And he created the one as well as the other. And ruachin comes from ruach, and lilin comes from night. And everything that is night is from the left side, as it was explained. Nonetheless, this isn't a time or place to go into a crash course on demonology. They wander around the world at night. They deride human beings and cause external pollution. Wherever they find men sleeping alone in their homes, they hover over them and cling to them, arousing lustful desires and having offspring by them. Because they're producing offspring. The offspring that they're producing is the collective sum of experiences in your thoughts. Because now your brain becomes polluted by one thing, and then it entices you because of breeding serpent. It needs to take your current experience and filter it through a collective sum of experiences to produce another new experience after its own likeness, as was written, according to its kind and its likeness. According to its kind and likeness means that you're sitting there and all of a sudden a person may be moved towards lust. And so then they entertain that lust, and now a new experience moves towards that lust. And now an action is derived from this. And now and more actions are derived from this. So now maybe they're getting on the internet and they're looking things that they shouldn't look up, and then this just continues to spiral on until they're after a 2-hour session or however long this guy's engaged in this type of activity, and within that time tens of thousands of thoughts have come into existence and birthed directly from the Sita Achra. And now their brain becomes polluted and they become perverse. This person ends up being a pervert. He ends up becoming, and in the extremes of this, they become a manifestation of that very demon that first existed as a minor thing. And the reason why is because the serpent first convinces you that it's you and then convinces you that it's God. At the point when the serpent convinces you that it's you, well, that's a collective sum of experiences. Well, if your collective sum of experiences is nothing but lust and nothing but judgment, which is exactly what people spend all day looking on social media, scrolling, judging, looking in the mirror in vanity and seeking to go towards things, setting our ideals and our desires and our wants based off of what others have, never being happy with what we have, so on and so forth. And when we live our lives like this, eventually when the serpent, which convinces you that it's you, your collective sum of experience convinces you that's you, then you become an embodiment of all those ideals. And now you have people that are sexual offenders, you have people that are rapists, you have all kinds of things like this, because those people have been, and they become embodied from what started off as one small thing and now are like legions, hordes, 1,000 demons to their left and 10,000 to their right, heaped on them like mountains of sand and animated by the spark of life in them, just like the spark of the Shekhinah animated the Klippa in the very beginning. And now their very life force is what animates all these demons, because it's their very life force that allows those Shainim to have a conduit in order to express themselves and eventually carry out atrocities. You see this with the Diddy parties right now. He turns into a complete Shainim. It starts off with small things, and now he's got 96-hour freak-offs and just horrific things your brain can't even wrap and fathom around the type of debauchery that's going on. And this is because he's embodied what began as one ruachin, one lilin, etc. And then it spirals until it becomes you. When the moon is restored, the letters Mem, Aleph, Resh, Tav, AMO'ROT, and the word Merot, which is a curse, turns into Aleph, Mem, Resh, Tav, Imrat. This is according to the verse, the word of Imrat Hashem is tried. And that's because AMO'ROT is Lilith, as it's been explained in Tikkun. But its letters rearranged become the divine word. And so then what changes the curse? The answer is the divine word. It says it right there. The word of Hashem is tried. He is a shield to all those who trust in him. He is a shield for all those who hold fast to the faith in the Holy One, blessed be he, against all those evil spirits and prosecutors who wander through the world at the time the light of the moon is diminishing. And so we find that the term light is transitioned into the divine word. And so when it says, let there be lights, it should understand, let there be the divine word, because the divine word is the only way to change. Otherwise, AMO'ROT, meaning let there be lights, which is spelled deficient because it means curses. And so curses were brought into this reality. Well, AMO'ROT is the numerical value Shemesh, sun. For this reason, Shlomo HaMelech said, vanity of vanities, everything done under the sun. Under the sun is because that sun is curses. And so when we go outside, what happens? Even existing in the sun can lead you to be cursed. How do we know? Well, skin cancer is a prime example of that. and everything that's labored in the physical reality. The sun is a symbol of physical materiality, material existence. King Solomon penetrated the depth of the secret of the nut, as is written, I went down to the garden of the nuts. And so he went down there to behold all the nature of the klipa, and he saw the nature of the klipa. And of course he proclaimed, I asked for wisdom, and behold, it was far from me. He found himself in the midst, tied up, and he beheld above us all of what rules this place. And what rules this place are countless shadim. I went down into the garden of nuts. He took hold of the shell, the klipa of the nut, and looked at all of its layers. He came to realize that the main pleasure of the spirits in the shell of the nut was just to cling to human beings and defile them. This is what's written. The ground is cursed for your sake. And how can the ground be cursed for your sake unless powers were created specifically to ensure that you are cursed? And pain and suffering and thorns and thistles, how could this be the destiny? Because if you want to know, AMO'ROT means curses, right? Is it not written the ground is cursed for your sake? And so then where one curse is, even though the word is not the same, but where one curse is mentioned, assuredly it hints to another place where curses are also mentioned. And so we find also the curses of the Torah. And what were the curses of the Torah? Those who do not listen to the Torah. Why? Because you fall yourself into default reality. And people do not understand the nature of the world that they find themselves with inside of. I once asked a Buddhist, why do you need to escape samsara? Why do you need to escape the cycle of reincarnation? I once asked a Christian, why do you need to be saved? And I said the same thing to the Jew. Why? I asked a fellow Jew, I said, why is there tikkun olam? What needs to be corrected? And there are deep levels. Order of emanation tells you that this reality is the opposite of God. Everything is the opposite of God here. Everything is the opposite of God. The opposite of a unified singularity is limited multiplicity. Well, what's the opposite of a perfect being? I'll tell you, an corrupted and imperfect being. And what's the opposite of something that loves you? Something that hates you. And so it's written, my soul hates. And my soul is Malchus, the level of the Klippa. And that's what they don't understand about the nature of this reality. This reality, without Torah, this place gets wicked real fast. This is why Malchus is the serpent. And so it says, because Malkuth is also the numerical value of Samael and Nachash. And it tells you the two forces that rule this place, Nachash, the serpent, and Samael. And they have to be redeemed, as we just saw about the divine word. So he sees all the layers, meaning all the klipa. The layers are concentric circles, because all the worlds are klipothic to the other worlds, and all of these are entities of judgment and things like this. This is why Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid to go through those places. Holy and blessed be, had to come protect him. Why are you afraid of my servants? But that's because he began to see the nature of this world and what was really going on. Shlomo HaMelech right here saw the same thing. And what did he say? Vanity of vanities, vanity of vanities, everything is vanity. And that's because life without the Torah is death. He who lets go of the Torah lets go of the tree of life. With the Torah, then curses become the divine word. And the delights of the sons of men, women, very many, shidot. This means that the demon Shadim take pleasure only in human beings. Because this is like we were put in this world to be punished. The ground is cursed for our sake, and we were given over to Shadim. And the different Shadim, their only function is to ensure we're cursed, to cause non-stop suffering, to make sure everything is vanity, everything is thorns and thistles. And if you're not cleaved to the Torah, they rip you apart. And there's not a single person who has ever survived, for the greatest of them have been forgotten. Their kingdoms lay in ruin, their memories wiped, their children cast off, their fortunes and legacies as if they never existed. And this is the nature of this reality, because every single day, these Shadim, these Lilim, these Ruachim, they're non-stop assaults. And that's why I said every person has 1,000 demons to their left and 10,000 to their right. And you should be lucky if you could even contact 7 angels to help you. And 7 angels versus 1,000, 10,000, 11,000 together. These are like the 11 goat skins. And these goat skins were inside of the tabernacle to tell us about the levels of the klipa, the levels of the husks. This verse also means that the male and female demons are born from the pleasure human beings enjoy during their sleep at night. but there's two levels of sleep at night. There's one level that refers to sleep, that is to say physical sleep. And there's another level of sleep that refers to spiritual sleep. And being at night refers to exile. And so when a person is in exile and they're spiritually asleep, these demons are produced. And so it says, it was necessary for the Holy One, blessed be He, to create and supply the world with everything, including klipo, so everything can be compared to the nut. Just as the inner part of the nut is surrounded by many layers of shells, the inner part of all the worlds are similarly surrounded by many layers above and below in the supernal worlds, and in this world, as will be explained. And so this was a necessary part of the equation, because again, concept of being the opposite. What is the opposite of a God who loves his creation? The answer is a God who does not love his creation. And what was the purpose of bringing forth the restriction in the first place? The answer is to bring forth a place for evil. Ramchal states this in 138 openings for wisdom. It's a perplexing thing. Why would the very will of God be to bring forth evil? Well, because that's something God cannot inherently be. What is evil? How could you show evil to yourself? If you're the only thing in existence, there's nothing outside of you, how could evil exist? What even is evil? There you go. And immediately, by that type of thought, that's the opposite. And to whom do you show that evil to? And so it's written, the thoughts of a man's heart are evil continually. So from the beginning of the secret of the supernal point, again, bringing us back into the heart spark, to the end of all grades, meaning all the level of Malchus, because again, even though they're cryptically describing, they're switching in between these stories about the creation of Adam and bringing in these aspects of Lilin and Klipin and all these other things, but they're using it on the map, on the roadmap of the Atik. And so they're using the Torah, days of creation, as a commentary to the creation of the Atik. And they're fluctuating. And sometimes they go into the story of the Torah, and we see keys there, but then they revert back to the creation of the Atik. And so then now we need to ask ourselves, what's the connection between what we just learned about all these Lilin, Shadim, and so on and so forth? And the answer is that the sparks emerged, and they gave life to the Klippa and the other side, which was a place called Tohu. This is why it says V'charet, because these were the kings. These were the Malkuts of all the levels. It says V'charet, those were 7, Chaita, Tohu, and those are the levels of the Klippa, V'boch v'chashek al pnei tachum. So they're all intertwined, so each and every one is a Klippa to the other. Look at this. Now everything is Klipathic. Everything is Klipathic. Read what it says. From the beginning of the secret of the supernal point, everything from the heart spark and below, to the end of all grades, they are all intertwined, so each and every one is a Klippa to the other. It's exactly as I've stated. Now, when you understand that reality, what is really going on in this place? And this is a level that only the Book of Dragons and SEFER HaSodar Azin HaSatan begins to actually reveal the real truth of. But those are very advanced texts, and these are the terrifying levels. Because without the light of Elah separate, without the light of what's shown in the very beginning, without that which was in the mind and the thought of the Atik, you would not be able to endure the reality of the worlds here or the worlds above. There's a reason why Yeshayahu says, lift your eyes to the heavens above and to the earth below. Behold, the heavens are going to pass away like a vapor, earth's going to pass away like a garment. Because what do you think is above us? The Christian says, oh, we're going to heaven. Yeah, you definitely are going to heaven. But that place is going to pass away. Earth, that place is going to pass away. And why? Because there must be something about it that you don't understand. And the prophet is saying, why place your faith in heaven and why put your faith on earth when both of these things are corrupted and destined to be destroyed? Why? Because it's very dark, it's very wicked, very evil. Which one of you have normal dreams? All of you, your dreams are chaotic. I know this for a fact, because all those worlds are klipathic. Where do you think you find yourself in the midst of? It's all klipathic. So if everything is klipathic, going all the way up to the highest level, arichain pin is satan. It's shintas noon. It's a beard. And what does a beard cover? The mouth. And what does the mouth do? It swallows. Swallows what? Everything. Everything. So oftentimes in ancient medieval art, they would just show Satan as a giant mouth, consuming everything. And this is why it said, woe to he who extends his hand to the beard. And what is that beard? That's because those sparks on various grades manifested different aspects, and they're all intertwined, they're admixtures. But nonetheless, it is as it's explained here. Every level, a klipa is a covering for the outer layer, just as a shell is a covering for a fruit. And at this level, it tells you there's only one answer. The only answer is the letters. That's it. There's no other answer. Those who cleave to partsufs are doomed. Those who cleave to ideas of worlds and all of those other things, they too. For assuredly, those things are husks. You should cleave to that which is the Shorosh. For even the world of Atzilus is emanating principles. But how many worlds came into existence to bestow the principles that it's emanating, and what defined what principles should be emanated and how they should be emanated? And yet, behold, the letters are the root and the mainstay and the cause of all of these things. And the only way to navigate this world is that, and that is the only way to turn curses into the divine word. Because the word curse is a saruf of divine word, just like it stated. So what is the divine word? The divine word are the letters you spoke. And AMO'ROT with a tav at the end means it's fixed. That means it's not a transitionary speaking. It's a fixed speaking, where everything is in a precise location, in a precise place. There are many, many different examples of how this can be brought into understanding, but the primal point is the internal light, whose purity, translucency, and cleanness are beyond comprehension. Because again, what is the point? The point is the heart spark. The heart spark is the thought. The thought was illuminated by the light of the word that entered in, which was the sun. And that light, which illuminated both mind and thought, could not be grasped because it was beyond the limit of the height and it was beyond the limit of the depth, meaning it was beyond the limit of the mind to conceive. And it was beyond the limit of the thought to contemplate. Because what's the opposite of a God that knows? What's the opposite of being all-knowing? And the answer is not knowing. And so the very first thing that came into existence, being birthed into existence, was mind and thought that could not know, and thus could only contemplate. And then what's the opposite of being unified? Being separated. And thus mind and thought realized it was separated. And what's the opposite of being one? Being a multiplicity. And therefore there had to be separation between God, or what would be considered to be God, and the illimitable. Thus the mind and thought, which are the Simsum and the heart spark, is separated from that which is the illimitable. The illimitable is beyond all those grasps. And that internal light and cleanliness is beyond comprehension, refers to the letters which descended through the Or Yoshar. And that straight light that entered in is still beyond comprehension and all of these other things. And it's telling you right here the solution to what I just said to get around everything being klipothic. And that is, unless you go right back to the cause and plug yourself straight into that light and that light alone, everything will become curses. This whole world becomes cursed. All the realities become cursed. But with the light, the illumination of everything comes in. Then it's written, now create new heaven, new earth. Create new heaven, new earth. And it says, you are my partner. It means we have to do it. We do that by channeling the divine light into the mind. That's why Mashiach is Yesh Moach, substance of the brain, as it was explained. And the letters become impregnated through Ibur, because the Ibur, or pregnancy, is likened to the contractions of a womb that gives birth. Simsum contraction, Simsum was mind. Thus the mind of the individual is the womb of the individual. And the letters impregnate that place. And that's the Ibur. And this is what Mashiach does. And then the letters illuminate their mind and their thought. And as they spread it to others, the Ibur spreads until they find the spirit of Mashiach dwelling in all of creation. And all that have the ability to conceive both mind and thought will become illuminated. That's redemption. When the expansion spreads, this expansion of that point becomes a chamber for the purpose of covering that point. And when it spreads, meaning when it spreads out from the heart spark into the 7 sparks beneath it, where Arich, Chaim-Pin, Al-Ba'im, Azram-Pin, Nukva are, all of those things are just coverings. All of those things become all heights of worlds, and they become above us, countless worlds. And they separate us from that light. And they become coverings for that light. They become husks and klipath. This is why all of it's considered to be klipathic. The light of the point is incomprehensible because of its great purity. And we know that purity is why it's called tahiru, because the tahiru comes from the word tahor, which is to say pure. And so this is all in the secret of the tahiru. Everything in that place is considered to be pure. And the klipa can't grasp it. They can't cleave to it at all. The chamber, namely Abba and Ima, which covers the concealed point, which is a Richain pin, which is now all talking about the sparks. Shin Tes Nun is a Richain pin. Abba, Ima are Netzach and Hod after that. Then Zeram pin and Nukva, which is Yisod and Malchus. Nevertheless, it is not as pure and subtle as the light of the primal point, which means that there's an admixture. Which means that even though a Richain pin has great light to Shin Tes Nun, it's still admixture. And this chamber issues forth an expansion of the primal light, which means that Richain pin, Abba, Ima, Zeram pin, Nukva begins to expand and create within the supernal chamber of the supreme Simsum many different chambers within inside of that, many structures. Because as the tikkun begin to happen, as those sparks, which are sparks of life, which is the Malchus, they're the sparks of the Nukva herself. It's literally Nukva. That's why it's called kings, because king is Melech from Malchus. This is the fall of the Nukva. That's the sparks of the Shekhinah. They're in the Klippa. They take on these forms, these structures, and they give life to everything. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. This expansion, Israel Saban Tavuna, is a covering for that pure and subtle chamber. So now, what he just gave is a very loose interpretation behind classic Lurianic concepts. And the interpretation behind the classic Lurianic concepts is the idea that Keter, he's saying, is Arichain Pin, Chokhmah and Bina, or Abba and Ima is in Chokhmah, and then Bina is Israel Sab and Israel Tavuna, like I said before. But again, this is commentary from the Ashlag system, and the Ashlag system was derived from various parts of Chaim Vital's system, even though that still is not fleshed out. Anyone who's read Talmud, Esther Sefirot, knows that nobody knows anything about what they're talking about. I mean, they get close to the ideas and think that they do, but they don't really get to the root of the matter because it never ends up being practical. But nonetheless, just for the sake of entertaining the technicality of what Ashlag was attempting to express, was the idea that Kether is husked by Chokhmah and Chokhmah is husked by Bina. That was his intention. Nonetheless, the first matter that I told you about the sparks and the heart spark is the real sod. So from here on, each one expanded within the other and became enclosed one with the other, meaning that all the sparks became, so Richain Pin became guarded by Abba, Abba became guarded by Ima, Ima became guarded by Zeram Pin became guarded by Nukva. And the most inner of all of them is the mind and thought of the Atik. And so where is the most inner level of all these things? The answer is the mind and thought. For what in existence is not moved by the mind and thought? The mind and thought is the most inner level of all things, and it's called the concealment of all concealments, because who can hear another's thoughts? Who can see what is in another's mind? And behold, this is the most concealed of all concealments. And the only thing beyond mind and thought is the light. And the light ends up becoming the most concealed of all concealed things, which everything is made out of the substance thereof. And so it says, there's a lot of commentary here. I'll read it for the sake, but take all of this with a grain of salt. A grade that is below it, so Abba and Ima, which are considered a garment for a Richain Pin, became the inner part and internal aspect of Israel Sab and Tavuna. Thus Israel Sab and Tavuna, from which form a garment of Abba and Ima, became the inner part of Zeram Pin. Thus Zeram Pin, which is a garment for Israel Sab and Tavuna, became the inner part for the female principle. The same thing occurred below in the lower worlds, Berea, Yetzirah, and Asiya. The female principle of Atzilus is enclosed within Berea, and Berea within Yetzirah, and Yetzirah within Asiya. Accordingly, the neshama in a man enclosed within the ruach, and ruach within the nefesh, and the physical body. In this image, the human being exists in the world with an inner part and an outer shell. This corresponds to a spirit and a body. All this is for the perfection of the world. And it was essentially as I've explained it. When the moon was united with the sun, meaning when the Nukva was united with Zeram Pin, and another explanation for this is that when the sparks were united within their sockets, because the sockets that remain in the face are the quality of the Ruach, meaning that they're the aspect of Zeram Pin. But when the sparks emerged from that, because the sockets remained in the heart spark, meaning the spark of Chesed, Ge'ur, Tifas, Netzach, you saw the sockets remained above. That's what creates the face of light. That's why you have 7 holes in your skull. And this is because it's a direct reflection of the place where the sparks emerged at the time when they were united. It states, the moon had its own light. But after the moon was separated from the sun, meaning when the sparks, the kings, were separated from the place which they had emerged, an example, the heart spark, it descended to the world of Berea and was placed in charge of the hosts of Berea. It belittled itself and diminished its own light. And because the sparks were only fragments of the supernal light from which it had come from. So klipa upon klipa were created, one above the other. And now it's because the sparks came out in the mindlessness. Why? Because it emerged outside of the mind. The mind was the Simsum. And when the sparks, which are the root of the forms, emerged, they emerged outside of the fullness, and thus in the place called Tohu. And Tohu was mindlessness, and it intermingled with the mindlessness, like a person who has. There are very other powerful terms that are used in a certain place, specifically in the Mother Sin, the Foolish King, that describe his copulation, his zivug with the mindlessness, from which all these demons, mindless seminal emission, because the word zerah or seed also hints to this idea of forms. Thus it says Adam sinned in his mind. Or says that Adam has sinned in his mind. How do you mean mind? It means simsum, restriction. And the seed that emitted came from his thought. That's the hard spark. And the seed were the 7 kings. And it intermingled in the mindlessness, meaning outside of the fullness. And it created all these klipot. And the idea of Adam hinting to the 130 years was to this, because 130, I already told you, was the backside. And where did the sparks emerge? But the backside of the fullness itself. And this is why it was in the mindlessness. And so klipa upon klipa are created one above the other to conceal the inner part, meaning the most inner chamber. All this occurred to complete the light of the inner part, because without a shell no fruit can be had. This is the reason why it is written, let there be luminaries, AMO'ROT, without the vav, which means a curse. Because all of these things would become curses. Because what's the opposite of a God that blesses its creation? The answer is a God that curses its creation. And what's the opposite of one God? Many gods. And so what was the first thing that Hashem, that happened, is that the opposite of a unity is a multiplicity, and therefore all of his attributes became the multiplicity. And therefore there was an aspect of Hashem that was the Gevurah. It was called Elohim. It was an aspect of Chesed. It was called El. It was an aspect of Tiferes. It was called Yidke Vavke. There was aspects of Din, aspects of loving kindness, aspects of mercy, and all of them were as if God. Why? Because each one of them were a direct attribute of God. And although they are all one, meaning that they are, everything ultimately is one, in this place it manifested as a multiplicity, meaning that the attribute of mercy in no place refers to Elohim. And the name of mercy in no place has anything to do with that of judgment, so on and so forth. And so these attributes became personified on their own, which is exactly as I've explained, that to one level, the multiplicity embodied itself, and every one of them were unique, meaning that each one of his attributes were very unique. And this is why when some of the sages went up to the highest levels, they were struck, and some of them became heretics and all these other things, because they could not grasp in safety these deep concepts regarding the Simsum, by which every heresy comes into existence. Is God in multiplicity? Are there many? And the answer is, according to the highest level, no. Everything exists within inside of the infinite itself. But in the Sum, there's absolutely a separation and multiplicity. And this hints to that idea. Thus, it says AMO'ROT Vav, the curse, because the klipa that emerged due to the reduction of the light of the moon, all this was done for the perfection of the world. Therefore, and the perfection of the world is because that the higher level operates with a certain amount of light, and then another level, and another level, and another level, and another level, until finally enough of the light of the endless had been restricted, screened, and filtered by all of these varying grades and sefirot and partsufs, that reality could function, and now it could operate in a very unique function, and if a unique fashion, because it now had intermingled varying grades of judgment, varying grades of loving kindness, varying grades of mercy, which were all necessary to create a spectrum. And so the higher worlds have more mercy, less judgment, and the lower worlds have more judgment and less mercy. And all of these now created a system by which there were many chambers for reward and many chambers for punishment. And ultimately, this created a cyclic process by which the soul, nefesh, would be manifested in the goof. The goof would be manifested on the earth, in the olam, by according to et, ruled by the property of Adonai, etc. And so therefore it is written to give light upon the earth. And what is the light? To give light upon the earth, the word light there is spelt very strange, as a yud, but nonetheless, the point of bringing down the light is to restrict the Ein Sof. And the reason why the word light here on 216 has a yud spelt in it instead of a vav is because yud is the nikud. It's the primordial point which restricts the light of the fullness through it, restricting it into that yud, which is that heart spark, and allowing it to pass through that heart spark and then screen itself by all the partsufs. This is all necessary in order to bring existence into being. As these klipot emerge in the secret of the shell that precedes the fruit. And so that brings us to the conclusion of this section. It's very incredibly deep. Again, as with yesterday, when you begin to understand the depth at which the Zohar is actually talking about, they are talking about, you would think to hear this stuff in the YIRAH. You would be thinking to hear this stuff at the very end of the Zohar in book 22. And yet we're in book 1. We're right in BREISHIT, which is again the reason why I said it was not intended that a person should understand. Rather, it is intended that a person should think they understand. And by the very thought of thinking they understand, they thus remove themselves from actually understanding by supplanting and replacing real wisdom with the idea of wisdom. Real truth with the idea of truth, which is the most dangerous thing. But it's also the perfect safeguard. So only upon meditating upon Torah day and night could you possibly come to the reconciliation. And as we go through these lessons, consider very carefully the approach. It's very methodical, line by line, step by step. And you see that every line the Zohar is describing is because it's describing an entire mathematical formula. And the formula is precise. It's this variable, and then the next variable, and then the next variable. It's one equation, another equation, and it builds on equations until the entire context of the concept is laid forward. And then you have to ask yourself, what is the conclusion of the formulas that have been presented? And for today's lesson is exactly how the Shadim and the Klipa come into existence. We learned that they come from the backside. We now know why Adam is 130 years, because Adam's a 45 name, which is the forms. Yitzirah, 45 name, and the backside, which is 130, the squaring of it, which is in it, the backside. We now know that the backside of the forms is what produces all of these different entities, these Lilin, Ruachin, and Shadim. And we learned that the entire system is klipathic. We learned that the word curses become as a saruf for the word divine word, which is one of the most important keys. I would encourage all of you guys to write that down. The word AMO'ROT is a saruf of the word divine word, because AMO'ROT is the solution to everything. And then to understand that the nature of all of the worlds are klipathic, one to another, this is very important. Once you understand that the entire system itself is klipathic, you can understand and reconcile what Ramchal said, that the purpose of the existence is to bring forth a place for evil. But with that, AMO'ROT, you must understand that the light was pure and beyond comprehension, and that we must connect to that pure light in order to survive and bring correction and tikkun in all this place. Because what's the opposite of being perfect? The answer is being imperfect. And so we who must walk in the ways of the Holy One, blessed be He, must bring about correction to the imperfection. And for us to bring about perfection to that imperfection, we must use the word. There's nothing else but the word. There's nothing else but the light. There's nothing else but the letters that will rectify this place. It is far superior to everything, and everything is considered klipathic in relation to it. So that is what should be taken away from this. So many blessings to you all. As David Amelech said, open my eyes and I behold the ones of your Torah. Amen, amen, everyone. Shalom and salah.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Shalom.
Shalom, everyone. Shalom, shalom. Hey,